You thought buying 10 acres outside Renfrew meant escape. The fantasy every freedom-minded Canadian still clings to. A wood stove, a hand-dug well, solar panels you actually own. You imagined slipping the leash. And then the inspector rolled up your driveway holding a bright yellow stop work order stamped under Ontario Building Code 2019 Division B, 936. Energy efficiency. He didn't care that your cabin wasn't even hooked to the grid. He cared that your alternative energy system wasn't engineered by a licensed professional. His words, you remember them. Off-grid doesn't exempt you from compliance. In one moment, the fantasy cracked. You realized the province will let you pretend you're free, right up until you try living that freedom. Because the codes, they're written for subdivisions, not you. And tonight, we're exposing 5 Canadian provinces quietly making off-grid living damn near impossible. You watching this right now, you probably grew up on some version of the same myth. Buy land, build small, keep your head down, and the government leaves you alone. It's the oldest Canadian daydream, the one where the wilderness is your companion and the rules stop at your property line. By 2020, thousands believed it. You'd scroll past YouTubers building dream cabins in northern Saskatchewan or families in Nova Scotia talking about homesteading. And you'd think, yeah, that could be me. And honestly, the fantasy feels real because the land looks free. Forests, lakes, cheap rural lots that seem untouched by bureaucracy. You imagine the smell of fresh-cut lumber, water drawn from your own well, heat from your own stove, electricity from your solar array humming softly in the trees. But here's what you don't see yet, and what no realtor will tell you. Every province has quietly wrapped that wilderness in a web of codes. You don't know it yet, but your property isn't empty. It's crowded with paperwork you haven't filed, inspections you haven't paid for, and penalties waiting to drop the second you put shovel to dirt. Call him Mike. In 2020, outside Thunder Bay, he built a 12 feet 16 cabin. No grid tie, no plumbing, just a wood stove and a dream. 2 weeks later, a township officer left a letter quoting OBC 8.1.2, sewage system requirements. No structure intended for human occupancy may exist without approved wastewater provisions. Translation: your simple cabin counts as a house the moment you sleep in it. And if you think that's overreach, just hold on. You think you're clever. You think I'll just build small. No one cares about tiny cabins in the woods. But here's the trick. They do. Because the codes don't scale down. They scale up onto you. Every province updated something between 2017 and 2022 that quietly tightened the noose. Take British Columbia. In 2017, they introduced the BC Energy Step Code, supposedly to encourage net zero homes. Translation: if you want solar off-grid, you now need air tightness tests, efficiency modeling, and a certified energy advisor, none of which exist within 150 km of half the province's rural towns. The fantasy feels safe because it's untested. But the moment you try living it, the system wakes up. Call her Jess. In 2021, she tried building a temporary shelter on her 5 acres near Salmon Arm. The municipal officer visited after a neighbor complained about smoke from her wood stove. He cited BC Building Code Part 9 and told her she needed stamped drawings for the foundation, even though the structure rested on skids. He ended with the line everyone eventually hears: you need a building permit. And that's when the fantasy dies. Next chapter. You start realizing this wasn't incompetence. This was design. You don't see the fence because it's invisible. It's made of words, not wire. Occupancy, safety, compliance, minimum standard. Rural land looks unregulated, but every square foot falls under a provincial building code, municipal zoning bylaws, health unit septic regulations, electrical safety authority oversight, and utility service expectations. By 2018, even Alberta, supposedly the Freedom Province, updated enforcement under the Safety Codes Act. Municipalities adopted stricter interpretations of Part 1, meaning any structure intended for habitation required a permit, an inspection, a recognized method of heating, an engineered foundation, and wastewater management. You know what that means. Your off-grid cabin doesn't get to be just a cabin. It becomes a dwelling. And dwellings trigger every code in the book. Call him Dave. He bought land outside Edson in 2021, parked a fifth wheel, installed solar. A month later, a county officer quoted Alberta Private Sewage Standard of Practice 2015. Recreational vehicles used as dwellings require approved sewage containment. Translation: your RV becomes a house if you plug in a fridge. And if you think that's petty, wait until you see which provinces weaponize environmental protection to block off-grid living entirely. Between 2017 and 2022, every major province revised its building or energy standards. BC Energy Step Code, 2017, branded as climate leadership. Translation: you need consultants before you can build a shed. Ontario Building Code, 2019 update. Strengthened energy efficiency and mechanical ventilation rules. Translation: your simple wood stove cabin is non-compliant by default. Quebec Construction Code, Chapter 1.1, Buildings, 2018, tightened enforcement of plumbing and electrical requirements. Translation: off-grid equals illegal unless you pay certified trades. Nova Scotia 2020 revisions to the NS Building Code Act. Expanded inspector authority. Translation: they can condemn your off-grid home on suspicion alone. This isn't random. This is a pattern. And now we enter the countdown. Ontario loves pretending it's the land of rural freedom, but by 2019 the province had updated Division B, 936, to tighten energy efficiency. And municipalities used it as a blunt weapon. Call her Sarah. In 2020, north of Muskoka, she tried building a 200-square-foot micro-cabin. She filed a permit, paid the fees, submitted the drawings. 3 months later, the township denied her certificate of occupancy because her solar system wasn't grid-tied, violating the acceptable permanent electrical supply interpretation used by several northern municipalities. She spent $8,000 on permits and consulting. Her cabin condemned. The officer told her, join hydro or vacate. Regulation used, OBC 2.4.1.1, occupancy requirements. OBC 8.1, sewage systems. ESA rules. 2018, requiring inspected certified electrical installations. Economic translation. Permit plus sewage review plus electrical inspection plus engineered drawings equals $12,000 to $20,000. Average land in that region, $15,000 to $25,000. Ontario's message: your compliance costs more than your land. Translation: off-grid isn't illegal, it's just financially impossible. And if you think Ontario's bad, wait until you meet British Columbia, where they pretend to be green while outlawing the only green lifestyle that actually works. BC markets itself as Canada's climate champion. But by 2017, the province rolled out the Energy Step Code designed, supposedly, to elevate energy efficiency. What it actually did? Create a regulatory moat around every rural build. To meet Step Code Level 3 or higher, you need blower door tests, energy modeling, certified energy advisors, and engineered HVAC plans. Try finding one of those within 100 kilometers of Fort St. John. Spoiler, you won't. Call him Luke. In 2021, he tried building a solar-powered cabin near Quesnel. His walls met code. His insulation exceeded code. But the inspector refused occupancy because he lacked a certified energy advisor to sign off on efficiency modeling, even though his home wasn't grid-tied. Regulatory weapon, BC Building Code, Part 9 Energy Requirements, 2018. BC Step Code, Implementation Guide, 2017. Economic collapse, energy advisor travel fee equals $1,200, modeling equals $2,000 to $3,000. Retests equal $800 each. Total, $5,000 plus just to prove your off-grid home is efficient. Translation: it's not about carbon, it's about compliance. But BC isn't even the worst offender. Alberta pretends to be laissez-faire until you actually try living without utilities. Alberta rural life sells the cowboy myth: no rules, wide spaces, do what you want. But the Safety Codes Act and Private Sewage 2015, standard of practice, tell a different story. By 2021, counties began aggressively enforcing habitable structure interpretations, forcing even temporary shelters into full compliance. Call her Anne. She parked a tiny home outside Lac St. Anne County, intending to live quietly off-grid. The inspector cited Alberta Safety Codes Act, Section 5, and Private Sewage SOP 2015, Section 2.1.1, requiring an approved septic system for any building intended for human occupancy. Cost of compliant septic, $18,000 to $26,000. Her tiny home cost, $19,000. Then came the kicker. The nearest certified septic designer was 122 kilometers away and booked for 4 months. Translation, Freedom Province, my ass. You think this is bad? Quebec brings out the big guns: language, bureaucracy, and mandatory trades. Quebec doesn't hide its control. It just wraps it in bureaucracy thick enough to choke you. The Quebec Construction Code, Chapter 1. Buildings, 2018 update, tightened plumbing requirements, electrical installation certification, and ventilation standards. And here's the twist. Quebec requires licensed Quebec trades for most of it. Call him Mark. In 2022, he bought land outside Saint-Raymond, installed his own rainwater system, wired his own solar. The regional inspector hit him with Construction Code, Chapter 5, Electricity and Régie du Bâtiment du Québec licensing rules, declaring all his self-installed systems invalid because they weren't done by certified trades. Cost to redo everything legally? $27,000 to $35,000. His land cost $22,000. Translation, DIY is illegal unless you're rich. You're not ready for what Nova Scotia does. They weaponize health and safety like no one else in the country. Nova Scotia pretends to be friendly, slow-paced, community-driven, but the NS Building Code Act, Revisions 2020, expanded inspector authority dramatically. Call her Laura. In 2021, she built a small off-grid cottage on her forested lot outside Antigonish. A health unit inspector visited after a neighbor complained about unpermitted occupancy. He cited NS Building Code Regulations Section 2.2 and NS On-Site Sewage Disposal Systems Regulations, and declared the building unsafe for human habitation, giving her 7 days to vacate unless she installed an approved septic and mechanical ventilation system. Septic, $17,000. Mechanical ventilation, $4,000. Inspection fees, $680. Total, $21,680. For a cottage she built for $14,000. Translation, safety means we decide if you can live here. Now that you've seen the provinces, it's time to zoom out because the pattern is unmistakable. Call her Emily. 2020, Interior BC, a solar-powered cabin, airtight as a submarine, insulated better than most subdivisions. She applied for a certificate of occupancy. Denied. Reason, her electrical system wasn't tied to BC Hydro, which the local authority interpreted as no reliable power source, citing BCBC 9.34, electrical facilities, even though the code never explicitly requires grid connection. The officer told her, off-grid systems must demonstrate equivalency to recognized utilities. Translation, if it's not hydro, it's not acceptable. Emily spent $14,000 fighting it. Lost, condemned. Call them Ryan and Mia. 2021, rural Ontario. They built a timber cabin on land paid in cash. No mortgage, no utilities, just a well, a composting toilet, and dreams. The township hit them with building without permit, occupancy without inspection, and illegal sewage system. Citing OBC 2.4, OBC 8.1, Environmental Protection Act, Section 53. Fines totaled $51,500 after court fees. Their cabin? Demolished at their expense. They fought it. They hired a lawyer who cost them another $12,000. They presented evidence that their composting toilet met environmental standards, that their well water tested cleaner than municipal supply, that their solar system produced more reliable power than the grid during the 2022 ice storm that left half the township in the dark for 5 days. None of it mattered. The judge ruled that compliance with building codes is not optional, regardless of the adequacy of alternative systems. The demolition crew arrived 3 weeks later. Translation, the province doesn't want rebels, it wants customers. And if you try to prove you don't need them, they'll make an example of you. Call him George. 2022, Nova Scotia, South Shore. He had a perfect well, tested clean, no issues. He'd paid for independent lab testing twice. Both times, the results came back better than municipal standards for bacteria, minerals, and pH balance. The municipality insisted new dwellings must connect to municipal water where available, citing NS Municipal Services Bylaw 12.4. The nearest water line? At the road, 400 meters away. Cost to trench and connect. $22,000 to $30,000. George lived on pension income. Monthly retirement check, $1,847. He showed the council his finances. He offered to sign a waiver releasing the municipality from any liability. He even offered to pay for annual water testing at his own expense. Denied. The bylaw officer told him, "Policy is policy. We can't make exceptions." George sold the land at a loss 6 months later. Never built. The lot sits empty today. Too expensive for anyone on a fixed income to develop legally. Translation: utility revenue is mandatory, not optional. Your financial situation is irrelevant. The system needs your monthly payment more than you need your independence. Different provinces, different politics, same outcome. Every denied permit, every forced connection, every demolition order comes back to one incentives structure. Utilities need customers. Municipalities need fees. Provinces need control. And you? You're the loose variable they can't monetize unless they chain you to the grid, left, right, green, conservative. It doesn't matter. Ontario weaponizes energy efficiency. BC weaponizes climate leadership. Alberta weaponizes safety. Quebec weaponizes certification. Nova Scotia weaponizes public health. Different language, same cudgel. The codes aren't evil. They're just optimized for a world where every Canadian lives inside a regulated, utility-connected, fee-generating box. Off-grid living threatens that architecture, not because it's unsafe, but because it's uncontrollable. Look at the pattern across every province. They all updated their codes between 2017 and 2022. They all expanded inspector authority. They all increased compliance costs to levels that exceed average rural land values. They all interpreted safety in ways that conveniently require connection to revenue-generating utilities. This isn't coordination, it's convergent evolution. When your provincial budget depends on utility taxes, when your municipal revenue relies on building permits and water connection fees, when your political career is funded by construction industry associations, the incentives align perfectly. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every safety upgrade is a revenue protection scheme. Every environmental standard is a barrier to self-sufficiency. Every modernization of the building code is another link in the chain keeping you plugged in. Picture yourself back at the start. Buying land, dreaming freedom, thinking the forest doesn't care how you live, but now you know better. The wilderness might be free, but the regulations aren't. Buying land doesn't grant autonomy. It buys you an entry ticket into a maze you won, built by provinces, enforced by municipalities, and funded by utilities that rely on you never pulling the plug. You wanted independence. What you got was a reminder. In Canada, the grid isn't just electrical, it's economic, it's ideological, and it's enforced by code. Think about Mike from Thunder Bay building his 12x16 cabin. Sarah from Muskoka spending $8,000 on a dream that got condemned. Emily in BC fighting for a year to live in a home that exceeded every actual safety standard. Ryan and Mia watching bulldozers destroy what they built with their own hands. George, selling his retirement dream at a loss because he couldn't afford the mandatory connection fee. Different people, different provinces, same trap. The fantasy wasn't that you could live free. The fantasy was that they'd let you try. Every inspector who showed up with a clipboard, every bylaw officer citing codes written for subdivisions, every township councillor denying exemptions, they weren't protecting you. They were protecting then the system that needs you to stay connected, stay compliant, stay paying. They'll keep you plugged in, whether you want to be or not. If you want more coverage exposing real issues like this, subscribe. The system counts on silence. We don't give it to them.